All right, friends, it's time to give you loyal listeners a discount on protein powder. You may or may not know, but I launched my very first protein powder 2 years ago. It's a grass-fed beef isolate with only 3 ingredients: grass-fed beef, either organic cacao or organic vanilla, and organic monk fruit. Now, if you don't want any of the added flavor and sweeteners, you can also just get unflavored. And no matter what flavor you choose, you're getting over 23 grams of protein per scoop, which is going to keep you full and satisfied between meals. I love starting my day with a Fab4 smoothie and breaking my fast with that much protein. It makes a serious difference in my cravings and blood sugar balance the rest of the day, and I've seen it with my clients as well. Now, I never thought I'd own a product company, but when I got pregnant with Sebastian, I realized the majority of protein powders were chemically extracted or enzymatically extracted, and I wanted to use heat and water only. I wanted minimal ingredients because we don't need those emulsifiers, fillers, or added vitamins, minerals, and probiotics. All of those additions increase the chances that it's not going to work for your body, whether it be bloating, digestion issues. I just wanted pure, clean protein to keep you full and satisfied so you could build the most delicious Fab4 smoothie. And I have to say, I'm pretty proud of the flavor. If you take a look at our reviews on Amazon, you'll see 5-star reviews for flavor. And that is key, because if you don't love your Fab4 smoothie and you don't love drinking your protein powder, you're not going to do it. It won't become a habit, and it's consistency that outpaces everything. So if you're here and you're listening and you want to give our protein powder a try, use the code podcast5 for $5 off your order. And let me know if you love it. My favorite ways to apply this protein powder is in my Fab4 smoothie, making freezer fudge, making chocolate milk, making hot chocolate, and throwing the unflavored into all my kids' baked goods. So let me know how you use it. Let me know if you love it, and share this podcast deal with your friends. Dr. Joan Ifland is a food addiction professional who is active in both online recovery and research. She has been an innovator in the field of recovery from food addiction since 1999 with the publication of her first book. She is a fellow of the American College of Nutrition. She has earned her PhD, and she is an MBA from Stanford Business School. She also has a BA in economics and political science. She is the lead author of the first scholarly description of processed food addiction. And she was also the lead author in the first scholarly definition of addictive versus non-addictive foods. Joan is an absolute expert, and I cannot wait to welcome her to the show. Dr. Ifland, thank you so much for being here. Your work is changing lives, and you're talking about something that is seriously, in my opinion, and probably in your work, another pandemic that we're dealing with. It's an epidemic, we'll say, in today's culture, and that's food addiction.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Kelly, thank you so much for having me. I couldn't agree more. It was a hidden epidemic that was going on before COVID and really set up the COVID mortality rates by suppressing immune function. Yep, this is an epidemic. And I think it is a pandemic. The tobacco companies bought Nabisco Kraft, General Foods, in the mid-1980s. They already had international, global distribution and advertising systems set up for cigarettes. And they just pumped those processed foods through those channels. And now it is a global pandemic. The World Health Organization lists diet-related diseases as the leading cause of preventable death on the planet. So it's all around us.
Right. Well, can we talk about what is food addiction and how it can be identified in individuals?
Yes. So the American Psychiatric Association has worked for 50 years to develop the criteria. What is an addiction? So for alcoholism, there are 11 behaviors or 11 manifestations of an addiction. So if you go into a drug counselor, an alcohol counselor, and you say, I don't know if I have alcoholism, they would walk you through these 11 behaviors or signs. And if you have 6 or more, you're considered to have a severe addiction. 2 or 3 is mild, 4 or 5 is moderate, but 6 and over is severe. And your listeners might be interested in hearing what those 11 behaviors are.
Definitely. Right. I'd love to go through them.
All right, let's do it. The first one is called unintended use, and it just means that you had a plan and you weren't able to follow it. So you woke up, I'm going to eat clean today, and by 10 o'clock you're in front of the vending machine. Or I'm going to just eat one and the box is gone, and you don't even have a memory of it. But I would say there's also a great way to think about this, which is regretted eating.
Mm-hmm.
So if you eat something and then later on you regret it, you didn't really intend to eat that. So that's number one. Number two is failure to cut back. And we know this is rampant in our culture. Over 70% of Americans are overweight or obese. And that means they've tried, I'm sure that they've tried to cut back. They would like to lose that weight. Being overweight in our culture is stigmatized. So they're likely trying very hard to lose that weight, and they can't. So that's failure to cut back. Number three is time spent. So increasingly, people will say, I seem to be thinking about food all the time. They're spending all of their time on processed foods, thinking about them, going to get them, eating them, preparing them, recovering from them, because they're groggy, they're kind of numbed out afterwards. And then time spent trying to exercise the weight away, or time spent dieting, time spent on cookbooks and diet books. It gets to a point where this is really consuming our lives, and kind of think about things that we would like to do, and somehow we never get to do them. So that's number three. Number four is cravings. And cravings are so prevalent in our culture that even the food advertisers make fun of them. You know, like I could stop if I wanted to for the water commercials.
Right.
We can't stop because we have cravings. Number five is the failure to fulfill roles. Like, I am so big, I can't get on the floor with my kids, and I'm still eating. I would like to apply for a promotion, but that means that I would be unable to hide at my desk and eat processed foods. Or I needed to take care of something, but instead I stopped for fast food. Failure to fulfill roles. The next one is problems in relationships. And it could be something as straightforward as my partner would like me to stop eating so much. My partner is upset with my body shape, but I can't stop eating. But it goes beyond that, because processed foods make us feel groggy. They give us brain fog and those intense cravings. Our partner, somebody that we know, might be trying to tell us something or ask us something, and we can't connect with them. We can't answer. We can't support them. And we don't want to be around them because we would rather be eating. So the classic example of this is, you know, we're waiting for our partner to go to bed so that we can go get what we hid in the laundry room out. We're not going to go to bed with them. We're not going to have that part of our intimate relationship because we would rather be eating. Or we get so tired of processed foods that really all we can manage is to watch a screen, television or a computer screen. So we're disconnecting from in our relationships. And there's a lot of rejection around body shape, which this particular addiction just has a big impact on body shape. And then the next one is events given up or activities given up. You're too big to go play golf anymore, and you don't want to go to those events because your body shape has changed. Or you're thinking you're so depressed from these substances and the way they affect the brain that you think, oh, nobody will like me. I don't want to go. Nobody wants me there. And I would rather go home. I have this thing to eat at home. So gradually people become isolated. Their worlds just kind of narrow down to times when they can eat food, processed foods. And then hazardous use. So, you know, you're leaving the fast food place and you're driving with your elbows so that you can eat your fast food. Or you know that whatever you're going to eat is going to drive your blood sugar through the roof and you eat it anyway. Or your body shape is such that you can't see your feet anymore and you're prone to tripping, you're prone to falling. Or some people have blackout eating. They're driving and eating and it makes them sleepy. So those are examples of hazardous use. The next one is use in spite of knowledge of consequences, which everybody has. I know I shouldn't, but, and then they go ahead and eat it. Tolerance, meaning that you're eating more of something than you used to. You used to have something in the evening. Now you have it in the afternoon, evening. Now you have it mid-morning and the rest of the day. And now you can't leave the house without it. Or you used to stop a couple of times a week for fast food, and now you're stopping for fast food every day. You used to stop in one place, and now you're stopping in two places. Or you used to buy this size container, now you're buying that size container, like particularly breakfast cereals and ice cream. People just keep getting larger and larger containers more and more often. That's tolerance, progressive use. And then the last one is withdrawal. So if you're eating for reasons other than hunger, like you're tired, or you have a stomach ache, or you're angry, or you're depressed, or you're bored, that is not eating. That's using a drug. You're heading into withdrawal. That's why you're having those symptoms. You're heading into withdrawal, and you're eating to avoid withdrawal. So I know in my travels, I rarely meet somebody who has less than 5 or 6 of those. The cravings are everywhere. People eating in spite of knowledge of consequences everywhere. People know they're spending more and more time on food. The unintended use and the failure to cut back, they're just very, very common. And then eating for reasons other than hunger. So that's 6 right there. And a lot of people are experiencing those.
Even as a nutritionist, and I feel like someone well-versed in the science of how food affects my biochemistry and my blood sugar. And, I look back at my childhood and having access to goldfish and, frosting covered animal cookies and microwaving my own taquitos or bagel bites if I wanted. Like,
yes.
I think it would be just unfair to say that I haven't felt or had experience using food to soothe, or knowing that more Rice Krispie treats was jack up my blood sugar, but I was going to do it anyways. Or, there is, I think the crazy part about food is that it's not like porn and sex and alcohol and drugs. This is the one addiction where you have to work on it and work on it and work on it. And I know that intermittent fasting is a thing right now, but we can't fast forever. You have to.
No, we do have some evidence that fasting precedes binging and bulimia, because it's you're waking up the food-seeking part of the brain, the part of the brain that for 7 million years has kept us from dying when there's not enough food, which the body only knows there's not enough food because you're hungry and you're still hungry and you're still hungry and you haven't found food. Well, that means there must be a famine.
Right.
And then you'll wake up the famine part of the brain, and then you're binging. That's how you know you're binging. That part of the brain says, man, if you find food, for heaven's sakes, eat it all, eat it as fast as you can. And then because you're in one place making all this noise, the predators are sensing you. They could be closing in. So you eat it as fast as you can, and then you run and hide. Right. And people are still doing that. That is primitive survival behavior. Wow. That has been evoked by dieting and fasting.
We need permission to eat. We need to know which foods are derailing and addictive, derailing to our healthy eating, but we need permission to eat the healthy foods or the nourishing, filling foods, and we got to get off the diet yo-yo roller coaster.
Yes.
The binge and cleanse, and cleanse. It's just making it worse. And you just said it. Bulimia is on the rise, and people are finding these very severe ways of dealing with it.
So this is really incredible research, but people who have body concerns are much more likely to start doing something extreme with their food, which will lead to the fear of famine binging. So it's very important to include body acceptance. The way to lose weight is to not eat the fattening processed foods. Eat the clean, nourishing, fulfilling, satisfying, happy making, non-craving foods that don't make you fat. So we know, for example, that high fructose corn syrup converts to fat on the body twice as readily as sugar.
Right.
So that is how we got fat. As soon as one of the soda companies discovered that in their internal research, they doubled the amount of high fructose corn syrup in their products, and then they doubled their advertising budget. And it's why you have the obesity belt is also the soda belt through the south of the United States. So it is, great, but it doesn't do any good to tell somebody to get off of processed food. It's too late for that. Like what you're describing, the processed food industry, as soon as tobacco took it over in the mid-1980s, they were Kraft, Nabisco, General Foods in the space of 2 years. They applied the addiction business model. And part of that, it's the 5 A's. It's a lot of advertising, affordability, availability, ramping up the addictive substances hidden in the product, the sugar, fat, salt for processed foods, the nicotine for cigarettes, and then targeting the youngest possible user, which in the case of processed foods is a newborn. So that's, you see immediately they ramp up the Saturday morning cartoon commercials for processed foods. Within 7 years of taking over those companies, those cartoon commercials go from about already 150 per Saturday morning, like 550 per Saturday morning in 7 years. And through that repeat, constant repeat exposure to those commercials, you can actually train their reward system in the brain to become addicted, to become hypersensitive, to pump out enough craving neurotransmitters to actually control behavior. The MRIs show it. The brain imaging research shows it. It goes from the addicted centers right over to the behavior centers. Frontal lobe is not involved. There's no firing in the frontal lobe. So there's no thinking, there's no decision making, there's no learning, there's no memory, there's no attention, there's no impulse control. It's this whole braking system just gets bypassed.
Yeah.
And I really hope that your listeners just know, really, this is very hard to get. Fight with people about this all the time. This is not your fault. This is the addiction business model. Powerful people have been exploiting the masses to profit from food for 9,000 years. The Mesopotamians went out, conquered other lands, enslaved those people, brought them back to Mesopotamia to be slaves, and took their land and grew food for Mesopotamia on their land. That's 9,000 years ago. So people have been being enslaved, made sick, even dying for this is something in human nature. This is not our fault.
Right.
Yeah, it's not our fault that we have these epidemics of diabetes, obesity, high blood pressure, stroke, cancer, dementia. These are all processed food consequences. But it is not your fault that you're doing this. It's not your fault. This is a really deeply seated addiction. So a lot of different substances, really intense stimulation in the environment. And it starts, really at birth with high sugar baby formula. So everything we've learned, all the life skills that we've acquired in the brain, in an addicted brain. Right. And it makes the whole disengagement from the addiction. You need a real immersion, long-term immersion program. You need somebody like you to tell you what to eat. And then you need somebody like me to give you relief from the cultural pressure and instead put you in a really kind, caring, but expert. We're not messing around. We know what's going on out there. And we can do that online, we have learned.
Wow. Let's talk about this a little bit. It makes me sick that big food companies are targeting children. I was a child of the 80s. I remember specific commercials, taste the rainbow. Once you pop, you can't stop. Sprite commercials. Like, this was my childhood. I know what those foods taste like. I know in the child's brain, it's like fireworks have gone off, even more than an adult.
Oh, I was born in 1951. I'm 69 years old. I have those same memories. This really, the whole processed food addiction and movement, if you will, accelerated after World War II. It started earlier when the big agricultural companies pushed the farmers in the U.S. off the Great Plains in the 1930s. They wanted to grow wheat. They wanted to grow addictive crops. They wanted to grow wheat and corn. They built the tractors and the combines that could do it. They didn't need human labor. They didn't need animals anymore. They pushed those farmers off the land. And, then there were gluts. So there was enough. Wheat is very, very addictive in the United States. It has an extraordinary high gluten content, and gluten contains amorphine, gluteomorphine. So in Europe or the Middle East, that wheat has half of what American wheat has in terms of gluten. So they would much rather grow a cash crop, not food that would feed somebody, but a tradable, exportable. The United States has used wheat in foreign policy. Corn is incredibly addictive. And then, in the early 1980s, 1970s, they developed high fructose corn syrup, and they you can make it anything out of it. Right. And they did. Yeah.
It's so heartbreaking. Can you talk about some of the chemical reactions that are happening in the brain when we eat processed foods? I know you just talked about glutamorphine. If you could touch on that and what's happening. Why is this so addictive? I know it's not our fault. I mean, like I said, I grew up with this food. I know what it tastes like. I know how addictive it is. I know how hard it is to try and use willpower. It's too hard for me at this age. Like, if I brought Skittles or Cheetos or something into my house, it would be, I know I have those memories from childhood. Like, I know what that tastes like. I'm not going to use willpower against that. I'm going to make one decision to keep it out of my house, not 20 every time I open my pantry.
Here's what's going on in the brain. If you understand what's going on in the brain, you can get this. Then you know precisely how to fight it. So these are highly addictive substances. Michael Moss just brought out the Hooked book, and he talks about research showing that when you put sugar or fat or salt in your mouth, it only takes half a second for the brain to respond. Now, that's as opposed to like 10 seconds or for cocaine and 10 minutes for alcohol. So you're getting this immediate explosion, highly addictive. Okay, so when that happens and they all trigger different reward pathways. So we do have research showing that if there are more different substances being used, it is harder to put the addiction into remission, meaning it's going to take longer. There are going to be more lapses. It'll take longer for the lapses to become less frequent. It'll take longer for the lapses to become shorter and shorter, but it's a long-term, multi-year process. So what happens then is the sugar activates the dopamine pathway. The fat activates the cannabinoid pathway, named after cannabis. And the salt activates the opiate pathway. If you've got flour or a carb, it can activate the serotonin pathway. Well, that's it. That's all the major addictive pathways. So I also I hope that your listeners really get this deep down on the inside. This is a severe addiction, typically. All the different substances, the food industry constantly messaging, making it available, making it very cheap. There's never been an addiction this bad, because even like opium or heroin addiction, you have to go to some effort to get the substance. You don't have to go to any effort to get these substances. So what happens then? Great. Now you have all those reward pathways, and they are pumping out neurotransmitters. They're pumping out brain chemicals. They've got the whole brain on fire. They're pulling all the blood flow to the addicted brain cells. Well, and so you don't have enough blood to fire your frontal lobe. And that's why we have attention deficit and learning difficulties and poor decision making and memory loss and poor impulse control, even some poor satiation and emotional processing. That part of the brain is not getting blood flow.
It's amazing to me too, because looking back years ago, and I'm wondering, I would have to speak to an expert to know if this is the case, but they did, I believe it was MRI or CT scans to look at blood flow in the frontal lobes to diagnose attention deficit disorder. When you're telling me that the food choices that we're making are redirecting blood flow, so you could have, like, is it a food diagnosis, or is it is food the problem, or is there a real blood flow problem?
So, Kelly, we're not making a choice. We're not making a food choice. We're not making a food choice. Just, people say, I want to make better choices. No, that's not what you want. You want the addiction to stop pulling the blood flow away from your frontal lobe. You're not making a choice. That's what addictions are. Addiction, the origin of the word addiction is to enslave. It comes from a time when if a person had a debt that he couldn't pay, the lender could sell that person into slavery to get the debt to be repaid. That process is the process of addiction, selling somebody into slavery to satisfy a debt. So we are enslaved inside our brains. But you can fix that. I want to just rush on. There's a fix. There's a
Yes,
fix.
I want to get to the fix. But
yeah.
I'm glad you addressed the problem, because it is one thing to say, like, I feel like I'm addicted to food, but I think there's a major scope of looking at, like, what is that really like? And, do people who don't even identify with food addiction, like myself, I can tell you that I know foods are addicting, that I know foods are hard to say no to, that I know foods, if they're sitting around in my house long enough, I'm going to be like, yeah, I have to have a bite of that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a problem.
It's devastating.
So what's the fix? Because
Okay.
it is an issue.
It is an issue. Another thing about availability, we do have research that, you're saying if it's in my house, Chef AJ likes to say, if it's in my house, it's in my mouth. So what's happening there is the primitive brain knows that that's in your house. So it's going to work very hard to get you to go eat it, because for those 7 million years of human evolution, animals didn't have frontal lobes. So you had to create a mechanism to get that animal to go over and eat that. And you did that by, if something was available, by secreting dopamine until it built up enough to grab hold of the behavior center. And I don't know if you've ever had this. I've had it. The zombie walk, the robot walk. I don't want to. You're going. I don't want to. I don't want to. It's in your mouth. That's the dopamine going straight over to the locomotion center, your frontal lobe. I don't want that. But the addiction wins. Right. It's such a big part of the brain because it's been being addicted for literally every moment of our lives. We've been stimulated by this availability, by the advertising, by seeing people around us eat this stuff.
Right.
Okay. So that is also not your fault. That's
right.
Yeah.
It's important. I mean, I have clients who are moms and we talked about this before the show, who have eaten clean and, they work out, they move their body, they feel great, they have kids, they bring kid foods into the house, and then they feel like they have no drive and they have no control over their life or their eating. And it's like, yeah, I mean, one, I don't think you should be bringing these into your kid's life, because you're the only one who thinks that they're being deprived of these things. If they are given two healthy options, they feel like they have options. And I just think it's so important to keep the home a safe space, because the example you use, we would all be zombies. We're all zombie moms running for our kids' food if it's available, and our kids are doing the same thing.
Yeah. So this is what you just said. Really could save lives. Just don't keep it in your house. You don't let people smoke in your house. You shouldn't let people bring processed foods in house. Processed foods are much more damaging than cigarettes. We were, as a country, much healthier when we were smoking in the 60s, 50s, 60s, and 70s than we are now. It's really bad. So what you have to do, first thing you got to know in order to fix this is that brain cells are very trainable. You can train them. So the reason we are all sitting here today is because when television was invented in the 1950s, the advertisers immediately started bombarding us with messages that trained our brains. So there's great research at Stanford. They take two groups of toddlers, 2-year-olds, and one group watches a 1-hour program. The other group watches the same 1-hour program with 5 1-minute commercials for a toy. And then they put all the toddlers in a room with lots and lots of different toys. The toddlers who did not watch the commercials picked out a whole bunch of different toys. The toddlers who watched 5 commercials all picked out that toy. It only takes 5 commercials. And here they are being exposed to 500 in a Saturday morning. Okay, so in 5 commercials, 5 1-minute commercials, the researchers were able to train those children's brains to prefer that toy. This is how we got here. Millions of commercials, hours and hours, passing fast food outlets everywhere, conformance drive being engaged by these commercials, massively huge grocery stores. Just primitive brain sees a grocery store like that. It's okay, well, we've got to eat everything before we leave here. Lots and lots of choices, bright colors, on and on and on. We're being really deeply manipulated. So the answer is to disengage from all of that manipulation. Really understand the value of ordering groceries, or if you've got to go to the grocery, you've got to be in and out in 15 minutes before the dopamine overwhelms you. And you've got to understand that stress, active stress and the addicted brain cells lie very close to each other. So when you're stressed, it's stress activating the addiction. You're not stress eating and you're not emotional eating. You are addictively eating, and it's been set off by an emotion. There's this whole step in the middle there of the addiction. Okay, so disengaging from all of this bombardment, all of this food stimulation, and then being around people who are eating clean enough of the day that you persuade your conformance drive, this is my tribe, this is my clan, this is my family. I mean, not family in the literal sense. So for 7 million years, if you were in a group of people, and they think that humans evolved in groups of like 7 to 12 people, and then maybe they had a nation that they gathered with a couple of times a year, but it meant that everybody could find enough food if they were scattered out that way. If you conform to your tribe, you would live. Your genes would get passed on. If you were a conformer, if you did what the tribe was doing, your genes would be passed on because you would be looking for food, eating, seeking shelter, getting into shelter, and fighting off predators all at the right time. But if you were the person who wanted to drift away by yourself, the wild animals would get you. You'd be somebody's lunch, and you would not live long enough to pass on your genes. So the food industry knows. And even in the 1950s, what did they do? It's in the messaging. So they had all this excess wheat and corn to sell, so they started making it into processed foods. And then they persuaded moms that convenience foods were modern, that old-fashioned women cooked, but the modern woman, the cool woman, did not cook. And that's shaming. That's shaming women, manipulating them, gaslighting them, emotionally abusing them. You're not good enough unless you're eating. It's just horrible what they did to women. And it worked tragically well. So it's the messaging in combination with these very highly addictive substances that you can afford a lot of, and they're very easy to get. And in this particular case, this is the only addiction ever that really started in young childhood. So it's really, really deep.
Right. I feel like our relationship as parents with food is so important when it comes to raising our kids, because I can think about like, well, if I never gave my kids a donut ever again, that means that I would never get to have a bite of donut again. And like, there is this scarcity situation that then causes people to put up all these walls. And it's, what am I getting out of the donut that I'm not getting from my life is a way deeper, maybe painful place to go when the donut feels really a lot less painful, and we'll just keep it around a few times and everything in moderation. And like, that is a hard road. I think for me, I would love to know how you parented your daughters after understanding the research. For me, I think protecting what's in my house is the most important thing for my kids. But I also, and we'll see as my boys grow up, I think I just want to have open conversations with them about what this food maybe is doing in their addiction center and how it's affecting them, so they can start making choices on their own.
Don't forget, they're not making choices.
Right.
So I know one thing I did with my kids was I gave them 2 lists. I said, I'm not going to give you these foods anymore, but I will give you anything you want off this list. Every time they left the house, they had enough food until I would see them again. And I didn't try to control what they were doing at school. But the cool thing is the body will cooperate with you. Because once your gut gets cleared out, the body's ability to break down these toxins kind of starts disappearing. The liver is no longer manufacturing the enzymes for those particular toxins, and the gut biota that break down those toxins dies off. So the next time they eat it, it makes them really, really sick, like pretty immediately. And then they've got mom, talking about, yep, that makes me sick. That makes me sick. And so they know what it is. And they develop a natural aversion. I mean, I couldn't follow my kids to school, and it would have been codependent and, damaging to try to control them while they were at school. I wasn't going to do that. I knew that much. But my therapist gave me the 4 rules. They can't bring it in the house. They can't eat it in front of you. You're not going to buy it, and you're not going to take them to get it. So a great combination of, nope, they're not going to cue you, and you're not going to enable them. So she drew the parallel. I mean, I couldn't believe this. But she drew the parallel immediately to smoking. So if you're trying to quit smoking, nobody's smoking in my house, and I'm not going to hang around while you smoke in front of me. I'm not going to buy you cigarettes, and I'm not going to take you to get them. So she just, this great vision. I'll never forget it. It was just so clear, and it saved my kids' lives. And it's worth it. It's worth it. It's worth it. It takes 4 days to clear up a brain that's been exposed to processed foods. They went on to the graduate schools of their choices, and they now have the jobs that they want to be in. And it's not fair. Their heads are clear. They're feeding their kids real meals. They had a huge, huge advantage going through school and now establishing their careers. I mean, they're just shooting up in their companies.
All of us as moms are going, well, what if? But you know what? You have boundaries, and you created these boundaries, and those 4 rules are going to stick with me from this podcast on, because that is, if my kids want processed foods, they're going to find a way to get them on their own when that time comes. And if their body feels the effects of that, they may decide not to do that again. And I would say from my experience of years of kind of cleaning up my diet, getting excited about healthy foods, interested in the science, following the science down the rabbit holes, loving the way that I felt on eating healthful foods and nourishing foods, you're exactly right. Like, those decisions hit harder, and I don't want it as much as I think about it. In my childhood, those addiction centers were firing pretty hard. And I think for most of us who grew up in the 80s and 90s, and even all the kids today, it's everywhere. It's rampant, and it's unfortunate. But people like you are the reason why we have the education and the knowledge and the know-how to make real change. And I'm so thankful for you and your work.
Thank you. I'll give you an example of how that conformance drive works. So we had the first day of a full day Zoom meeting. At the beginning, people were really worried. I don't think I can do this. At the end of the day, they had done it. We had another member who joined the addiction reset community on a Monday. And her problem was she would eat clean all day and then lose it in the evening. So she ate clean all day and she had a lapse in the evening. She said, well, I'm in a program that allows lapsing. We don't try to force an end to lapsing. We just keep working the conformance drive, and we know sooner or later people will come around. Tuesday, same thing happened. She had a lapse in the evening. But the third day, she said, I'm in a program that allows lapsing, but I don't want to. And that's the conformance drive kicking in. I want to be like those people. I don't want to be like these people anymore. And it's a gentle, respectful, doable. It's actually, I know I get nailed for this, but it's easy. It's shockingly easy. Like that new member had been trying for years to get her food under control. And, within, 3 weeks, she was able to go to her daughter's house for the weekend and eat clean the whole weekend. She said, I never thought that would happen. Why? Because all of our programming is on a computer, a tablet, a phone. You can take your tribe with you. But that is, I've tried 14 different, major, even having a prepared meal company over 25 and a half years. And this is the only thing I've ever seen work. And it's because of Zoom. Because you can get on it for enough hours to persuade your brain, this is my tribe, I better don't conform to them or else I'll die. That's the primitive brain. So you can't use the frontal lobe to face off directly against the addicted brain, but what you can do is use the frontal lobe to control the messaging that reaches the addicted brain, to control the cueing and the triggering and the stimulation that reaches the addicted brain. And through that, then you can retrain brain cells not to react to triggers, not to train your locomotion centers, your movement centers, your behavior centers to check in with your frontal lobe rather than checking in with the addicted brain cells. You can train the brain to do that, but it takes a lot of hours. It's like learning a brand new language.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that you touched on earlier in the podcast that it takes years because it's built up in our bodies over years and years and years. And I think we have these expectations nowadays, especially that things are going to happen overnight. They're going to be immediate. I'm going to start this new program plan diet. It's going to be the best thing ever. And if we're never focusing on the lifestyle, if we're never focusing on the habits that get us cooking in our kitchen, that get us moving, and building those slowly and going down the rabbit hole, getting excited about the way that we feel and celebrating and having gratitude for those good days and those nourishing meals. That's, I think, what perpetuates all of this. It's never overnight. I love that you made that clear because I think everyone else is promising short-term fixes that just make us less motivated the next time around.
It's a huge setup for failure. It's part of the trauma that we've endured is being told we ought to be able to do these fakey, weak programs. They're not going to overcome a severe addiction. I have another member who spent $4,000 on a 12-week program with a trained professional. And the trained professional could not understand why my member could not follow a food plan and kept blaming them and shaming them. And what is wrong with you? And why don't you just eat what you're supposed to eat? Drove her into lying about what she was eating and making her ashamed of it. That's traumatizing.
Right.
And so the practitioner doesn't say, oh, I don't have the training to help you. No, they say, there's something wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with me and my training. There's something wrong with you. And it's incredibly traumatizing. Well, what's one of the issues that we work through with people when they come into our program is coming into our program is triggering all that old trauma. So we're all over. This is nonstop kindness. You can teach somebody self-kindness, they're much more likely to get control of their food. It's a pretty cool discovery that self-kindness is the pathway to getting control of your food.
I love it. It feels good. We aren't machines. We're human beings with emotions, and we talk to ourselves more than we talk to anyone else. So those conversations need to be kind.
And we've been taught to hate ourselves. Because this not only is this addiction you can't get under control, but it leads to a certain body shape that the culture feels free to traumatize people all over again. People really have deep self-hatred from not being able to get this under control. So we're just nonstop compassion. We do train to manage ARC members. We have an ARC manager training program where people can work from home. They can make up to $60,000 a year. We train them, and then we recruit their member base, about 125 people. And it's working. We're actually paying people to manage ARC members, where we have trained ARC managers to manage ARC members. Way back in my past, I had a Stanford MBA. And I've always thought I could give people a job doing this. It would spread. And it's happening.
I love it. I love it so much. And I think this is you're an invaluable resource for people, from your textbook, Processed Food Addiction, to your community, how you're showing up for people. You're Zooming almost all the hours of the day. You're showing up, you're providing the community so that they can join their community, and this behavior can be reinforced, and they can understand this isn't their fault. And they can disengage from things, whether it's, commercials on TV or following infatuation on Instagram or whatever it is, wherever you're seeing these triggers. If you have food addiction, or if you identify with any of those 11, I guess, identifiers of food addiction, if you
signs,
if you identify with those signs, I feel like this is following your tips and checking in with you online would be my advice. It's heavy. It's a big issue in the United States. It's a big issue around the world. And we aren't equipped to use willpower against it. And we need our community.
It won't work. Anybody who tells you just use your willpower, they don't understand what's going on in the brain. Can I also tell your listeners, we have a lot of free resources.
Yes, I want you to tell my listeners where to follow you, where to follow along, where are your resources, and share everything.
So we put everything in one website, processedfoodaddiction.com. The Processed Food Addiction, the very first segment on that is free stuff. I was given, the timing on this it's an amazing story on this textbook. My dad died at the same time that CRC Press asked me to write the textbook. And he left me enough money that I could just devote 3 years to writing this textbook. So while I was writing it was just such a gift from the universe. I started putting out free information. I thought, this is how I'm going to give back. So we have a lot of different resources, but if you just go to processedfoodaddiction.com, the first segment is the free stuff, our Facebook group, our YouTube channel, free websites, handouts, and then you can get comfortable with all of that and then make a decision about whether you want to do something more immersive.
I'm so sorry for your loss of your dad, but I think the silver lining of this was that you were able to pour all of your hard work into a very powerful textbook that is already changing lives. And thank you for giving back with your free resources. I will make sure all the links are in the show notes, and we're sharing those throughout. It has been an absolute pleasure to get to know you. In real life, it feels like via Zoom versus just following along on Instagram, but it's a powerful topic, and to know that sugar, fat, salt, carbohydrates are hijacking and our brains and releasing chemicals like dopamine, serotonin, opioids. Like, this is a real addiction. And I think more of us are fighting it than we even realize.
I think most people have it. When you look at the amount of substance and how addictive it is, most people have it. I have a quick little story about it. When I had my prepared meal company, we were serving a high-end law firm. We just wanted healthy meals. They didn't think they had an addiction. But at the end of the week, I would talk to those guys and they would be like, my brain seems to be clearer. I seem to be thinking more clearly. I'm not having the mid-afternoon, mid-morning slumps. And I'm not craving so much. Do you think that's because of the food? I'm like, yeah, but I wasn't expecting you to have that reaction. These are the highest functioning people. These are the cream of the crop law school guys. And they're suffering from it. So it's a little illustration about how I know everybody has this.
No one's immune. No one's immune. My husband always says, everybody poops. I said, it's just, you can't be better than the animal inside of you. And the reptilian brain, the primitive brain, it can take over. And we just need to have the education that you're providing to understand, okay, this is a real thing. This is how it's hijacking my brain. These are the steps to healing, and I can do it. I'm so thankful for you. I'm cheering you on from the sidelines and supporting along the way.
Thank you.
I feel called to share this information, and I'm happy to be a platform for your expertise. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Be Well by Kelly. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Learn more at bewellbykelly.com and follow me on Instagram at bewellbykelly. I would love if you picked up my books, Body Love and Body Love Every Day. They're sold on Amazon and at all major booksellers.